All right, the music went down. That's my cue. Get started. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our fourth annual Night Campus Distinguished Lecture. This is all the seminars we do all year long. This is our flagship event that we look forward to so much. We've had some really fantastic speakers for this series, including Verily CEO Stephen Gillette, Dr. Brian Drucker, who many of you know is the director of the Night Cancer Institute at OHSU, and Texas A&M's Dr. Karen Woolley. All of them obviously extremely well recognized in their fields and all sharing a real commitment to leadership and innovation. And our speaker today, Dr. Susan Margulies, is obviously cut from that same cloth. She's an internationally recognized bioengineer, a really inspiring leader, a terrific mentor, and just a wonderful human being who I've had the pleasure of knowing for a long time. Susan's academic journey started at Princeton, where she majored in mechanical and aerospace engineering. She did her graduate work at Penn and then completed postdoctoral training at the Mayo Clinic before returning to Penn to start her faculty career, where in 2004, she was the first woman to be appointed full professor in biomedical engineering. I've known Susan since her days at Penn and was very fortunate to work with her more closely when in 2017, she was selected in a national search as the chair of the joint Emory-Georgia Tech Biomedical Engineering Program. And during that year or so that we overlapped together at Georgia Tech, I learned that Susan really has an innate curiosity in people. And so if you've had the opportunity to meet with her today or will later, be prepared to be asked a lot of questions. She does that a lot because she's interested in you. And that's really one of the things I've always appreciated about Susan. Hopefully you'll also hear a little bit about her research, because in addition to being an amazing leader, she's had a very distinguished career in biomedical engineering, and more specifically, injury biomechanics is her research area. She's internationally recognized for contributions in really two areas simultaneously: pediatric trauma, brain injury, and lung injury. Discoveries in her lab at both Penn and Georgia Tech have opened up avenues for prevention, intervention, and treatment of these injuries, and really saving lives, promoting healing in some of our most vulnerable populations. And in recognition of her contributions, both as a leader and in research in biomedical engineering, Susan was elected to the National Academy of Engineering in 2020. In 2021, Dr. Margulies began the next chapter of her career journey when she was appointed as the head of the NSF's Directorate for Engineering. She is the first biomedical engineer to lead NSF's Engineering Directorate. And as she'll tell us more about, her directorate enhances U.S. innovation through its centers, partnerships, and small business programs, and is a driving force behind training and development of the U.S. engineering workforce, something we all care very much about. As the lead of this directorate, she has enormous influence on policy and resources that impact our work and our goals. And it's very exciting for us to have a fellow bioengineer at the helm of this unit. So Susan, thank you so much for taking time. I know how incredibly busy you are now to be with us today. The timing of this is wonderful as we launch in partnership with Oregon State, our PhD program that's now 3 years old, and now our new department of bioengineering here at the University of Oregon. We're very much looking forward to learning more about your vision for growing engineering research and education in the United States and through your new leadership role as the NSF Engineering Director. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Well, it probably wouldn't surprise you, Bob, that on our family vacations when I was growing up, called Susie then, of course, my parents, as we were, imagine we're at State Park X and the Ranger Tour, you know, at 6 o'clock at night or whatever it is, or maybe it's 3 in the afternoon. And my parents would say, remember, Susie, you get just 5 questions. So it's been going on a long time. So it's my pleasure to be here and to share with you a little bit about the role of NSF in really funding biomedical engineering, and many of the off products that we have on laboratories and academic institutions, as well as on academic institutions. So it's my pleasure to share with you today. See how we can the slides go. Okay. Not able to do that.
There we go.
All right, so I decided to change my title. So if you thought I was going to talk about one thing, I'm going to talk about transforming health through engineering, which I think is something that really meets with the initiatives on this campus, as well as those that I'd like to envision are part of the state, where we see that engineering is really going to be the vehicle through which we can be incredibly transformative in making long-lasting change in medicine and in health. And as a faculty member, I went to NSF for funding across a wide range. My first grant was an R01 from NIH and a career award from NSF, literally just a year apart. Major research instrumentation grants from NIH, from NSF. From NSF, I had awards to innovate in graduate education and career path mentoring for second and third year PhD students, as well as a RED, or revolutionizing and engineering departments, from NSF, both of those from NSF. So I turned to NSF at different points in my career, and also had funding from NIH. And what I hope for you to take away is to understand how NSF should be part of your portfolio of funding early and often in your research and your educational initiatives, and to think about workforce training as something that's important, not just for someone out there, but in your lab. Okay? I was emboldened when I realized that the word health was in the NSF mission. How do we address health as an agency? And when we think of health at NSF, we think of health of our population, we think of health of our planet, we think of health in many different ways. So as the first biomedical engineer to lead the engineering directorate, I am boldly into human health as well as health of our planet, and am developing partnerships with NIH to more clearly articulate those areas in which we co-fund, in which we collaborate, and those where we know that we occupy parallel spaces. There are many ways and pathways that NSF funds that NIH does not. That's important for you to take away from today. So NSF by the numbers is available to you, and I'll show you what your state's funding is in just a second. But what I'm very proud of at NSF is that 94% of those taxpayer dollars go out the door in grants and awards. That our last data that we can share with you today is fiscal year 21, and I'll have 22 next week, but it's this week, so I give you what I can give you. $8.5 billion. The CHIPS and Science Act proposes to double NSF's budget over the next 5 years. It is an authorization without an appropriation. It needs your advocacy to demonstrate that NSF's mission is important for the nation. And it's very important to fuel both the expansion of education, the expansion of our workforce, and the expansion of discovery research, as well as translational research. So the NSF budget has been growing. And as you can see now, what's before Congress, hopefully it will be appropriations, in fiscal 23 is our largest budget yet. If the CHIPS and Science Act were fully funded, it would be even larger than our proposed budget for 23 in 23. These are your fast facts for Oregon. You can drill down into congressional districts, actually, to find out what the NSF funding is for your district. So the total awards to Oregon is quite impressive, over $123 million. And you can see how that money is being invested. Oregon State, I'm so glad that Dean is here. You can see is the leader in the state in terms of NSF funding, but the University of Oregon is not far behind, but you could do better. And so I'm going to share with you all the ways that I think that you could take advantage of opportunities for funding for this campus. So who does NSF fund? What stage does NSF fund? The engineering directorate funds all of engineering, to go from my own research in injury biomechanics to lead a department, which spans really all of biomedical engineering, to lead an engineering directorate that spans all of engineering. We have a president here. He's supposed to represent the entire campus. It's, you know, it's an awesome privilege to be able to speak on behalf of all engineering. The scale is from the single student being funded on an REU to huge groups of investigators and networks of campuses. The breadth is from a single discipline, and more we recognize that convergent approaches is important. I like to think that being a biomedical engineer, that is part of the fabric of who we are. We understand that interdisciplinary is where our field of biomedical engineering began. You have to have that electrical engineering course, that chemical engineering course, that mechanical engineering course, and it'll all be woven together in applications in your later years, or not, to an approach that is truly convergent, where that course actually embeds the disciplines of many aspects of engineering with the application on the scale from the single cell or subcellular up to a macroscopic level. And that's the way that we need to do our science and engineering if we're really to change the approach that we take to problems and to learn from each other. So at NSF, we believe that the single discipline is still important, but we also recognize that the convergent approaches in education and in research are required to really be transformative. The career stage is, of course, as you can see here, from undergraduates to late career. The innovation cycle is really from very basic discovery research, in my case in engineering, through translational research. So it's quite broad. How do we do that? Sometimes it's unsolicited grants. You see that we fund these things. More than the NIH are solicitations and dear colleague letters. Fondly called DCLs. I had no idea what they were, and I realized I was missing out on how NSF communicates to the community. So please sign up for these. A dear colleague letter is an opportunity to say to you, we're especially interested without set aside funds in a particular area, and we mean it. That means the discretion of the program director to have an emphasis in funding proposals that are in a particular area. And we're highlighting to you that we're interested in that. Please treat that as a signal that you take advantage of. I'd like to talk about our track record that we have of transforming health through engineering. I'll begin with the track record. What have we funded in the past, and what kind of discoveries have been made when we think about the bio and biomedical research that's been funded in the engineering directorate? What impact has it made on medicine and health, and the opportunities for biomedical engineers? And then I'll talk about expanding and diversifying our workforce, which is briefly important if we're going to increase the number of engineers at scale, and accelerating scaling impacts. And hopefully you'll find opportunities for yourself there. So in terms of our track record, in terms of leadership, there have been major milestones in biomedical engineering through innovation. Of course, we can talk about the 50s, you can go back further. This is a slide that I actually developed for an A&B talk that I had. It's interesting, sometimes I have to pull things from my my Emory Georgia Tech computer into my NSF government computer. And my assistants say, wow, that's a really great slide. Who knew that you could actually do those things in academia? But NSF has been there as well. In LASIK surgery, which maybe some of you have benefited from, I certainly have family members who've benefited from that, NSF funded in the early 2000s key investments in femtolasers, which really converted the procedure in collaboration with a physician. An engineer was funded by NSF Engineering Directorate funding to really change the process. Instead of beginning with basically a specialized scalpel and then proceeding with a laser, it's completely laser focused, high precision, highly reproducible, and actually better outcomes with fewer complications. That was NSF funding, not NIH funding. In MRIs, we've been funding since the 50s and through the 90s developments, and we continue to fund today through the engineering directorate. And those early dollars were before the engineering directorate was developed, which was launched in the 1981. So NSF has been funding biomedical engineering innovations for decades, even before. And in tissue engineering, our investments in the early 80s, and I'll describe those in more detail, have really resulted in the building blocks today of synthetic biology, which now is eagerly adopted by biologists, but they came from engineering and the investment from the engineering directorate. So I really want you to think of the engineering directorate as a place that you can go to fund your most innovative work. I often think that some investigators have described to me their funding deserts. They can go to this funding agency with this that they do. They go to this funding agency for this part of what they do, but neither agency really recognizes that what's truly unique about their program is the intersectionality of bringing all of these disciplines together. And that's something that I work on in my current role in building partnerships with other agencies to be able to identify those research grants, solicit those research proposals, and identify the most meritorious ones, and then fund them from both agencies. So advancing manufacturing is something that was funded at NSF, and you can see the NSF investments on the top row, and then the current, if you would say, the benefits on the bottom row. I like to say that digital twin modeling is something that we've been using in biomedical engineering for decades. We use computational modeling as a tool that both inspires experiments and then expands on experiments. And you can see other investments on the top that have continued to yield benefits, not just in biomedical engineering, but other areas of engineering. So I really want you to understand that NSF is funding things that are fundamental in engineering for a broad range of applications then and now. In nanotechnology, you can see the development of the nanotechnology initiative, which started in the 2000s with the blue arrow across the top. But if we just pick a few, you can see that investments that were made in the top by NSF have continued to yield important societal impact below. Biotechnology, I like to say, is in NSF's DNA. It's something that I've been really trying to communicate broadly and make sure that people understand the role that the National Science Foundation is playing in biotechnology. I sit on a committee, it's a White House committee for pandemic innovation. And NSF didn't have a seat on that committee. And it's actually NIBIB director, Bruce Tromberg, who said, you know, we should have NSF on this committee as well. And the research that's being done at NSF, not just in the engineering directorate, but in multiple directorates within NSF, is critical to not only tackling the current pandemic, COVID, which we really are not through, and preparing for the next pandemics. Already monkeypox is something we're discussing and more. So of course there was NIH and CDC and DOD and a few others, but actually NSF needed to be at the table. It's very exciting to be there. So biotechnology is in NSF's DNA, and you can see some of the NSF investments on the top and how we continue to reap benefits on the bottom. Some of them we're just beginning to scratch the surface on. If I take the far right, we have biological computing, of course, which we funded in the 2020s, and we're just scratching the surface of innovative DNA's data storage and other aspects, or thinking of the brain as an inspiration for the circuits of tomorrow. Incredible efficiency and speed and low energy usage. So in the early 1980s, this was actually engineering research centers were launched in 1985, and SynBerk, or Synthetic Biology Engineering Research Center, was one of the first. It was in Berkeley, and it really helped fund, at the same time that we were working and funding at NSF, many tools of synthetic biology. What SynBerk was working on is how to assemble organoids and other structures into functional entities. And the protein designs and scaffolds really have created a foundation for current engineering research centers, and a few of them are indicated here on the right-hand side above. And this investment was a major investment. The ERCs, or engineering research centers, are $50 to $60 million over 10 years. And these investments demand industry at the table. We must have industry members. They're involved in early stage research to hasten the translation to industry of the inventions, but also the workforce training piece and having industry involved in the high school students, the undergraduates, the graduate students, the postdocs who are engaged in this. Now in their generation 4, engineering research centers demand societal impact. It'll be exciting to see what the centers come up with as their metrics of societal impact. We've had economic impact as metrics that have been important for quite a long time, but now it's societal impact. Define for us how you will measure your societal impact, and we demand that. This early stage investment has spawned tools that are now in common use across labs, not just hugely funded labs, but even small labs. But what's critically needed is how to get from your lab to industry. How do we do that? Some of what you'll see if you check out NSF is really funding laboratory to industry, so lab to fab types of investments. So the Agile Biofoundry is a consortium of 7 Department of Energy labs and 7 government labs, actually, not all DOE, to allow you to have funding to be able to take your discovery from your lab and to then try it out in one of the national labs. They're eager to meet you because you are part of their innovation engine. They want your students because they need to expand their workforce as well, but they also want to meet you and begin collaborating with you. So these lab to fab opportunities are not just about translating your innovation, but it's also a matchmaking to help you meet new partners to fund your research and to excite and catalyze your research from the perspective of those who are taking now your research for very specific applications. I want to remind you that there are also Biomanufacturing USA institutes, 3 of them listed on the bottom, BioFab USA, Biomade, and Nimble, where it's about making it industry ready, beyond the lab to fab, and now it's industry ready. It increases the value of your IP to go through these additional steps, which are really enriching for your research and often take you back to the lab because you identify areas of weakness or new ideas and new opportunities. We like to say at NSF that we're funding at all stages, including Nobel laureates. So Frances Arnold, who's winner of the 2018 Nobel Prize in Chemistry for Directed Evolution. She has many NSF grants, beginning with a career award to Frances that launched her career. But Jennifer Doudna is a current awardee, as well as had a great deal of NSF funding. And Caroline Bertossi is actually a current award winner of a future manufacturing award. This is from the Engineering Directorate, and these are manufacturing ideas that are not yet reality. So her work was awarded the 2022, this year, Nobel Prize in Chemistry for click chemistry. So she's already thinking beyond lab to fab, how do I actually change manufacturing to actually make this commonplace at scale and at an economic reality? So wastewater surveillance is also an investment that we've made over the years, where we funded in the early 2000s just the idea that you could find treasure in the trash, actually specific DNA fragments in wastewater. And now it's been an important source of information for a pandemic and public health, and it will continue to be. So NSF is really important in that, and it creates multi-agency coalitions to be able to use the information that's being generated, not by single investigators, but by networks of investigators. It's key. So when I think about describing this moment, wow, we've had a series of winning months. In August, the CHIPS and Science Act of 2022 was signed. It explicitly says in the CHIPS and Science Act, read the and science part, please. In the and science part, we have engineering, biology, and biomanufacturing as an area of emphasis. And all agencies who can contribute are called out. And at NSF, we are already on board with plans for that. You can imagine with engineering, biology, and biomanufacturing that the Engineering Directorate has a very important role. In September, the executive order was signed, advancing biotechnology and biomanufacturing. Engineering is front and central in that executive order, and the National Strategy for Advanced Manufacturing, which calls out biomanufacturing as a separate section. The importance of workforce, education, as well as research from fundamental to translational work is being called out. And of course, the Engineering Directorate, not surprisingly, is named. There's always a grid, which agency is responsible for doing what. NSF is responsible for nearly everything on that agenda, not just related to biomanufacturing. I looked at our portfolio and I wanted to say, what are we publishing in this area? I like to think that publishing is actually an important aspect of impact, because while it's not yet to change society, that's the beginning of reaping the tangible rewards of funding that we've provided. Many times I hear about what we're funding. I want to know what the funding is actually doing. So if you have NSF funding, please get back to us with notable papers. We really like to celebrate those and make sure that they receive a broad visibility. So I've highlighted just a few things with a little petri dish in a hand of areas that are broader than thinking about health and medicine, where bio and biotechnology and biomanufacturing and bioengineering can have impact. And what I want you to realize is that what you're doing in the lab can have an impact on agriculture, can have an impact on food, so sustainable meat substrates. It needs tissue engineering substrates and technologies to do that. So please go beyond and develop those collaborations with other investigators on this campus and other campuses to go beyond your application of your technology. When we think of bio-based foams for the building industry, of course, there are tangible relationships with bioengineering as we think of it for medical applications. So think beyond your applications, find those collaborators, translate your findings, your methods to other fields to have even broader impact. I encourage you. When I think about what we're funding right now, I think that you would be surprised how much NSF is funding, $336 million in 2021 alone across the entire agency in the area of biotechnology and biomanufacturing. Again, highlighting just a few for you. So when I came, we had a strategic plan from 2010. Took a good look at that. I didn't like the mission. It was very passive. So we worked, all the division directors and I worked together to come up with a mission statement that was really action-oriented and transforming our world for a better tomorrow by driving discovery, inspiring innovation, enriching education, and accelerating access really spoke to all that we do. We liked our vision statement. We kept it. That one was actually developed in 2025. No, actually 2005, excuse me. But we needed some goals that would focus us on the problem, the people, and the partnerships that we needed to form in order to accomplish our mission. So really propelling the US leadership in transformational engineering and emphasizing societal impact. Expanding opportunities for people. That is to access our solutions, to engage in research and education, to be at the table, to even define the problems that we should be studying. These are key. And to catalyze purposeful partnerships. Before I even started, I asked each division director to share with me their partnerships that they had. And then I said, wow, these are a lot of partnerships. How does NSF benefit from these partnerships? And how do the partners benefit from NSF's participation in the partnerships? And what we identified is some of these were very effortful and not necessarily producing much benefit. So we're focusing on purposeful partnerships right now. And some of those are to encourage the translation of results that are in the sphere for NSF in the engineering directorate to take it to the next level and to help create those on-ramps for you to be able to translate your work. Do you have to have had NSF funding to be able to take advantage of those translational pathways? No. So you may find yourself, I don't know how to fund this translation, and then you come to NSF because NSF understands the importance of translating. We also had to look to ourselves, where are our strengths? What is the engineering directorate going to emphasize? And in the upper left corner, you see engineering discovery. If we don't fund the headwaters, there's nothing to translate. So it's important to fund engineering discovery. Engineering discovery can even happen in something that we think of as applied, like manufacturing. If we don't really fund discovery in manufacturing, like our future manufacturing is funding discovery, then we will not change manufacturing. One of the reasons it took so long to get COVID tests, at-home COVID tests, is that we're using technology for the fabric from the 80s. Why? Well, because we need to have more funding of engineering discovery in manufacturing and in materials and processing those materials at scale. So the research that is related to education and engineering also is for the engineering directorate. So you see there are many areas, and I hope you find yourself in many of these areas for engineering. We also came up with a strategic cross-engineering directorate priorities. Clean energy technology, integrated power, climate change adaptation and mitigation, bioeconomy, biomanufacturing, next-gen microelectronics and wireless. There are bioengineering parts of every single one of them. The most effective strategic plan is one where people say, I see myself in this strategic plan. And I hope you see yourself in this, and then that your research aligns with where we're funding. The verticals are our values. We'll make sure they are part of our solicitations and our opportunities. So what have we been funding? I want to highlight just a few things. I want to emphasize the importance of that intersection between climate change and health. This has been National Academies of Medicine. I was actually elected to the National Academy of Medicine as well. So both of them, medicine and engineering in the same year, it was like, wow, somebody is watching over me. That was a thrill. But National Academy of Medicine really is emphasizing climate change and health. Bioengineering has a role here. And it is with collaboration with your friends and colleagues in environmental engineering and civil engineering and many others. You can see that we're funding projects, but you also see that we're looking for your proposals. Predictive intelligence for pandemic innovation had a 22 call. It was really a seed grant to get people thinking about it. So these were development grants. We funded over $26 million across the entire agency, and we anticipate phase 2 center grants that will be coming out this year. In biotechnology for health, I highlighted one here from the University of Oregon on the right, one project. But in fiscal year 23, you can see 2 areas. One of them is that Dear Colleague letter. Remember, that's appointing you with continuous submission to be able to identify opportunities for you to submit your best ideas. So in engineered living systems, it's one of our EFRI projects, or engineering frontiers. It's about thinking about leveraging the capabilities of living cells and organisms to design, fabricate, manufacture, and modeled engineering systems. You see the areas in the bullets, and the proposals are due in February. So hopefully you'll see some of these. I'll leave this presentation with Bob, and I'm happy if you distribute it so that you can see, wait, I want that proposal deadline. So in artificial intelligence and health, many applications. The engineering directorate and NSF as a whole is funding in this area. When I think about quantum science and engineering, it really is the future of microelectronics. We really need to understand such an impact in medicine that is possible, as well as in other bio applications beyond medicine. And please think of those opportunities. And there's one here on this slide in December. In semiconductors and microelectronics, we have many opportunities that are going on right now, not surprisingly, but we also feel that it's important to take a lead role in providing that lab to fab opportunity. And one of them, and you see here, the second bullet in the lower half, you can see here that we're providing the opportunity because those manufacturing capabilities in the US do not exist. We actually are providing one for a TSMC in Taiwan to have US investigators be able to have early fabrication experience in Taiwan. We'll take whatever it is, when we can get it. And as those other facilities come online, we will connect you to them. The future manufacturing for health is a whole track called biomanufacturing. But in fact, we had many health-related ones in the eco-manufacturing and in cyber manufacturing. So you'll find opportunities there. Design, build, test, and importantly, learn. These are opportunities for your students at the undergraduate and graduate level, as well as postdocs, to have an experience in the fabrication aspect. Yes, there's that project they're working on, but also the opportunity to take that hands-on learning to their next position, whatever their next position is going to be. And we have the consortium with the BioFoundry, the Agile BioFoundry, which is the 7 labs you see here on the top right corner for lab to fab for biomanufacturing. I really encourage you to take advantage of that and the Manufacturing USA Institutes. So how do you find out about them? You go to our web page. If you have any trouble, please just write me directly. I have people after these kinds of talks that say, it went by fast. There was one that you mentioned. I will tell you, I will connect you. So please reach out to me. So biomedical engineering and bioengineering are really funded in our core engineering programs. And I encourage you to reach out to program directors. One of the reasons that they like interviewing for program director positions is they like mentoring, not just mentoring students, but mentoring faculty like you to be able to take advantage of their mentoring about your best idea. Is it best aligned with which program? Not just their program, but introducing you to the program directors who you should be meeting. Expanding access to research infrastructure critical, critical. I had an MRI grant when I was at the University of Pennsylvania. It was a confocal microscope, which was available to the entire campus. It was in the year 2000. We didn't have a lot of them then. And it was key. It was creating a core facility that did not exist. Think about that when you're talking about major research instrumentation that is up to about $4 million. But then above $4 million, we had nothing between that and 100 million, which is a major research facility. So we created mid-scale research infrastructure. And these proposals for the mid-scale R1s, as you can see in the middle, are due in January. The R1s are from $5 to $20 million facilities, okay? You are then making this facility available not just to your campus, but to all US investigators. The mid-scale R2s, which are the proposal submission deadline is closed and we're evaluating them now, they're from 20 to $100 million. And these major facilities really are so important for the infrastructure of science and engineering in our country. So I would encourage you to think about industry university cooperative research centers. You don't really have one here. This is a low-hanging fruit opportunity, okay? So these are industry partners are mandated. Money from the industry partners come to this campus, okay? They sit at the table with you as investigators at this university, and it can be multiple universities. In fact, we encourage that. It doesn't have to be. And this is pre-competitive research. Everybody is signed on to the IP being shared IP. This is early stage that typically results in industry-sponsored funding at the next level. These are small pilot grants. Your students are there at the table. As an investigator at the University of Pennsylvania, I participated as an investigator in one of these. They actually changed my pilot idea. The industry partners, my industry mentor, who was one of the members of the IUCRC, changed my idea to be something that was going to be more readily translatable. So instead of working in a black box and say, now I'm ready to translate, and if industry say, well, actually, I wish you would have done it this way, or didn't you test this? It's very early stage. We have 84 of these. They're not so hard to get. Topics are all over the map, and all, as you can see, the IUCRCs are all over the map as well. There are over 700 industry members that are related to those IUCRCs, and you can have federal agencies be members as well. Each of them are putting in money, and NSF puts in money as well to help fund the infrastructure of this IUCRC. So key. And you can collaborate. Then the START program is one with technology, two-year technology colleges. Think about the difference that you could make in a two-year technology college where you bring those members into your labs to be able to work on research programs that are at the interface between industry and engineering activity. So one of those IUCRCs is the AMBIC, the Advanced Mammalian Biomanufacturing Innovation Center. You can see here who the partner institutions are. You can see their center members from industry, mostly industry. And you can imagine that their focus is on high throughput genome-based technologies to fast track advanced biomanufacturing processes. The pilot projects are small. They are really readying technology for larger scale investment, either by industry or through NSF or NIH, as you can imagine, would be very interested in these projects. And I really think that this could be an opportunity for this campus to have maybe even more than one. The ERCs, we have funded now 70, we just funded 4, so we have 79 ERCs currently. And in 21, we had 14, and you can see their locations. We just funded 4 new ones in 22. And already, I think of the 15 that we have current, about 6 of them are in the bio-related areas, biomanufacturing and biotechnology and bioapplications for engineering. So it's very important for you to realize that these are very large investments, and there's a process by which you have a letter of intent, and it's refined, and then eventually a site visit. And so these are very large investments, but I think you can aspire. Georgia Tech is where you were trained and you were a faculty member a long time, is not the only institution that was very deliberate in really thinking about how do you fund large scale collaborative research on a campus. What are those investments? to cultivate the partnerships with other campuses, and to invest in early stage collaborative projects on your campus and others to really ready the campus for this type of an investment. These are a few ERCs. I mentioned that there are 6 that are in the area of bio. And you can see just from the titles and their topics, it's pretty exciting, from subcellular to really macroscopic types of topics in bioengineering. So now we're talking about transformational impact. That's really what this campus is about. The Knight campus is about transformation. So it's important for you to recognize that NSF also funds startups, and here are just a few. So the SBIR and STTR programs were actually initiated at NSF in the engineering directorate, and now many agencies have SBIR and STTR programs. And it's important for you to realize that that critical funding is still something that NSF fuels. This is a mandatory part of our budget. So as our budget increases at NSF, so too does the funds for SBIR and STTR. I really want to take a moment to talk about expanding and diversifying our engineering workforce and our biomedical engineering workforce. I think biomedical engineering has been enormously innovative. It's been recognized by the National Academy of Engineering Gordon Prize for Innovation multiple times. And I think that as you rethink your programs, now at the graduate level, but maybe at the undergraduate level, really build on the shoulders of those who have come before you in biomedical engineering and rethinking how effective engineering education can really be really catalyzed on this campus. We really need to move faster. This is a pictorial depiction of the workforce of America and where we are in science and engineering in the workforce. So we would need to double the number of women, triple the number of Latinx, again, 2.5 times the number of Black and African Americans in our workforce, and American Indian and Alaska Native double. Suffice it to say, we're no better in engineering, we're just as bad. We still have those gaps. We've been talking about diversity and inclusion for a long, long time, and we really haven't moved the needle. So thinking about how we actually can move the needle is important. When we think about bachelor's degree by engineering discipline, people often talk about biomedical engineering. Here we are, 50% women, except look how small we are. In order to make real progress, we need to work on some of those fields. You can see that computer science and mechanical engineering are areas that have the most number of graduates. But actually, if we can increase the number of women across many disciplines of engineering, we'll be able to move the needle faster. We, of course, have a pipeline problem. Just because we train them with bachelor's degrees, and these are, you can see biomedical engineering on the next several slides will be on the right, they do not necessarily all want PhDs. I think that's fine. I believe in actually having a broad range of career options for people. All those with PhDs do not necessarily apply for positions as assistant professors and so on. So we actually need to do some work, perhaps be innovative. Maybe they're members of our colleagues who are in industry who really want to come back to academia in a way and contribute to our workforce on campus. I think Hispanic engineers, as you can see, we have intersectional aspects that we really need to face, where men and women who are Black or who are Hispanic are making choices very, very differently. So we need to be very mindful and deliberate in the innovation that we have in terms of how to diversify our workforce and diversify our campuses and our educational offerings. So I want to just highlight a few things that are available to you that we fund and that you can apply to. Teach Engineering is about democratizing engineering. If we don't have engineers in high schools, how are we going to inspire more high school students to pursue engineering? So this is actually a program to teach engineering concepts in high schools by high school teachers who are not themselves engineers. Engineering for USA is another one. So I'm sorry, Teach Engineering also has a lot of curriculum. So if you ever wondered what happened to career award things, you need to upload them to Teach Engineering. So in addition, Engineering for USA is about providing a standardized curriculum. We actually believe that this is a stepping stone to an AP exam in engineering. and AP credit. We don't have that. That's one way to focus attention on engineering. Revolutionizing engineering departments, or RED, is proposals are under review now for some of these, but there's a new track for two-year institutions. And I was just talking with the dean of OSU about the idea of actually two-year tracks it could be a four-year institution, reach out to two-year, right? And create those types of initiatives. Projects in biomedical engineering abound. You can see some here. And expanding and diversifying the workforce includes many other programs. I just highlighted a few. You can see some here. To your graduate students who I had lunch with, I mentioned the intern program. This is for PhD students to have an internship of about 3 months paid by NSF in a non-academic setting. This often happens in their third or fourth year, where they're in industry, they're in a government lab, they're in some non-academic setting. Okay? And of course, they need your permission to leave the lab for those 3 months. But it's a really important opportunity for your students to be able to open their eyes to career paths. You can see other experiential learning for high school students and undergraduates on this slide as well. And again, I'll leave the slides. So broadening participation in engineering is an initiative that has continuous submission, but also has some target dates next week. Can't participate for next week, but this will be a continuing solicitation. I mentioned about inclusive mentoring hubs, which is listed as a third bullet here, and centers for equity in engineering. Inclusive mentoring hubs are all accessible, so everyone can attend these programs. This is very important if we're going to create inclusive opportunities. So I really like what you're doing. What's it called at the very first week, when Impact Week, which is that for our PhD students, where there's a number of things. It's not just how to survive here in graduate school, but also really taking those steps and creating an inclusive opportunity for every member of your graduate program. Early career support, I want to remind you that it's more than only an early career or career award. I think also in terms of postdoctoral fellowship program, we're highlighting opportunities. These are 2-year postdoc fellowships, and there's an emphasis on women and underrepresented groups for this, and we've awarded 65 of these 2-year awards already, and they will continue. We have about 65% women, about a third Black and African American, and another third that are Latinx, and about a third of the institutions that are hosting the research are minority serving institutions and HBCUs. So building innovations and ecosystems, the new TIP Directorate or Technology Innovation and Partnerships has launched the NSF Regional Innovation Engines. This is about taking translation from basically what an ERC would do, which would generate IP that would then be translate to industry, to think about regional innovation that creates economic impact in a region. And these are due this fall, and actually January, and these are very exciting new development and investments for National Science Foundation. I see that the engineering topics, whether they're advanced manufacturing, whether they're biotechnology, are the lead number of ideas that were submitted. So this is one of my last slides, and I want to share with you that I did some work using dimensions to be able to ask for those publications over the last 10 years that list NSF Engineering Directorate funding and NIH funding. Where does that NIH funding come from? Because we recognize that, like me, your funding is going to come from multiple agencies simultaneously. And if you look on the right, these are the NIH institutes that are co-funding work from the NSF Directorate, Engineering Directorate. So when you think of your NIH work, I want you to think about diversifying that portfolio as well. I personally had only gone to NINDS for my brain work and NHLBI for my lung work. And I look at this plot and I say, maybe I should have been thinking more broadly. We have co-funding opportunities with NIH, and we're working on expanding those. This is an experiment in microgravity. I mentioned to a couple of you that I got up very early in the morning. I took a 1:30 a.m. bus very early on Sunday morning to watch the launch of 7 projects go up. two of them are biomedical engineering projects, as you can see. And got there and it was lots of fun, and they scrubbed the lunch 5 minutes before it went off. So it really went off on Monday when I was in Atlanta doing the experiment. So that was, so just to summarize, I want to say that I hope that I leave you with, wow, why am I not thinking about NSF for my research at the early stage, as well as translational work, for ideas that I have, for education, as well as for workforce training? Please think of NSF. We are here to really energize and fuel your work. I'd like to leave you with the brand new OSTP director's words. Arati Prabhakar said just 2 weeks ago that in order to really have societal impact, we actually need to have a societal shift to reap the full benefits of science and technology. I like to say, and engineering. To have a what does it take mindset to really mobilize around bold goals in this country. It's a I can, not a how are we ever going to do that mindset. The equitable access to science and technology education and other opportunities, and considering the societal implications. In bioengineering, we do all of those. So opportunities to do it at scale are coming, because what we do is already in the sweet spot of where this country is going and where the investment by Congress is going to be directed. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Susan. So we do this thing where it's like sitting up on the couch and in a talk show. I think we have a few minutes for some questions, and then we have a reception where we can continue the conversation. But I'll open things up. Maybe I'll start the questions with, we actually are part of the ERC, the CNAT. Yep. And one of the things that does is it connects to collaborations in Puerto Rico and Ireland. So what you talked about, an amazing array of funding opportunities. What is NSF's current position on the co-funding international type projects?
Oh, thank you for that. So the international projects that we fund on the US side. And there's something that ERCs have been participating in called center to center grants. Those will definitely continue. We look at other opportunities as well to do this that are not just at the center level, that are at the individual investigator level. So we have a number of those, and I have met with a lot of different countries' ministers of science and technology, and there are a number of them that are bubbling up. So on Monday night, there is one for Taiwan in the semiconductor. So it's bringing investigators together. Anybody can sign up. And it's the first step of that Taiwan award that we have to be able to create workshops. Well, the first is always a workshop, helping people meet each other. How do you meet each other? But the center to center grant has moved forward because they have basically an opportunity to look things up. Because going to a workshop depends on who signed up for the workshop, if they actually come to the workshop, if you can find them at the workshop, and if you manage to talk about the idea that would be the best one for all of you, for each of you to talk about. So that's a little more happenstance. So what we'd like to do is to be expanding the opportunity for you to be able to more carefully research who the best partner would be for you in another agency. The interesting thing is that the Department of State, our Department of State, takes an active role in that. So if you're having trouble finding a partner and you see a solicitation where you can funding is available for a partner in name a country, come to us and ask how you can find those partners, and we can actually help you get to the right people who can help that. So that will continue. It will actually expand.
Great.
Yeah.
So other questions, and particularly students, don't be shy to ask a question. We can bring the microphone around. Nick's not a student, but it's been a long time since you've been a student.
But so thank you very much for coming and speaking to us today. It was great to hear about the mission of NSF and where it's headed. One area that I was surprised to not really hear much on was big data and data science. And I was wondering where you see that incorporating into the various programs that you guys are currently doing, and if there are initiatives that you envision coming specifically in that space.
Definitely. So I think of big data as being a number of different aspects. So one aspect of big data has to do with machine learning and other kind of AI techniques. And there are aspects of pushing the frontiers forward in that are definitely that are agnostic to the application. And then there's the idea of using it more in what you do. That is so a part of what we do, it doesn't deserve special mention. It is what we do. It becomes part of any research grant. So that a novel application to a particular area of fundamental area of research is something that would be awarded in any program directors. You don't need a special program for that. I like to think that the computer scientists and data scientists no longer really own that space. It's become a tool that as engineers, we love tools. I love going to Home Depot, and there's an aisle of, data science tools that we just use. So if you were a data scientist and developing tools in a novel direction that would be agnostic, you would primarily be going to the Computer and Information Science and Engineering, or CISE, CISE, director. But if you're using them, engineering. And we need it. So when I think about power grid and I think about integrating a broad range of power sources into one single grid, or resilience, or we think about smart materials that are used from biomedical applications up to bridges, I mean, this is data science is critical. Data science is a part of, we have sensors everywhere. I was on a director call this morning, and there are all these buoys everywhere collecting data about ocean temperatures, and we're studying global warming. And of course, data science is needed to make sense of all of it at speed, because it's great to have it, but if we can't interpret it until next year or 10 years from now, we can't use it to make decisions, and we can't use it to test interventions. So when you think about wildfires, and we're getting data during wildfires from drones, this is the engineering directorate. We have models that we're using to take that data, to make predictions, to think about where the first responders need to be to prevent the spread in that direction. And what about the embers that are going because the winds are at this altitude? That's data science on steroids, right? So we just use it as one of our tools without a special call out. So thank you for pointing out that it wasn't special, but we need data scientists. We need data science to be part of so many projects. So it should be part of your team. And if you are a data scientist, please reach out to many different people. Yeah.
I think it's a great point. I mean, I think everybody we're recruiting these days is a combination, often bench scientist and data scientist at the same time. So you talked about an amazing array of different funding areas, and NSF also has all these different mechanisms, from the graduate student to the companies to individual PIs to big center grants. As you look ahead, and the NSF budget hopefully is growing, like you said,
Yep.
Are those programs all going to proportionally increase, or do you see NSF making investments preferentially in bigger collaborative things versus the individual, or where do you see NSF putting its resources?
So in the CHIPS and Science Act, there are some things that are called out. Creating broader opportunities so that science and technology and engineering can reach more people. So the geographic diversity as well as the demographic diversity is going to be important, okay? So who we fund is going to be also increasingly important. Who are we inviting to learn about the panel review process, to participate? We don't have a formal program where I've chaired study section a number of times at NIH, and they actually have a program by which a junior investigator is at the table with all these bigwigs. And you can watch videos about what study section is like, but it's really different being in the room. And you learn by reading. I learned by being a member of study section first, an ad hoc, and then a member of study section. I changed my writing style because I saw so many grants and how best to communicate. I started realizing the importance of the visual appearance of your grant. that you got to break it up with some figures, everyone. Here's a whole page with nothing but text. So it's something that as an assistant professor, I did not appreciate. And that serving on now panels at NSF will be important to bring more people in to make sure that not only are we encouraging more applications, but they're successful and competitive applications. But the other thing that I'll say is that I come in to an agency and I look at all of these investments, like an ERC, incredible test bed. You're part of CMAT, right? So incredible test bed. Why don't we think of that test bed as being a facility that other investigators can have access to or not part of the ERC? And why don't we fund somebody else to be able to, from the university of some small place, to be able to come to those facilities, to use them as they would one of the national large NSF funded facilities, and look at facilities much more broadly. As we have investments, how can we connect more people to the investments we already have? I then asked, do MRSECs ever talk with ERCs? The answer is no. Could we think of creating an interstitium by which an ERC that's doing tissue manufacturing or cell manufacturing thinks about their problem very differently, that they have the right solution to a different problem, and that we create funding mechanisms that link together a biology innovation institute with an AI institute, with an ERC and a MRSEC on a topic that none of them are funded on, but they're capable of doing, and that we connect individual investigators to this new interstitium that isn't a center. So I think about how can we do more with what we have through mechanisms that we've not dreamed of.
Good. A couple more questions.
Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciated your slide that talked about the kind of the strategic goals of equity and broadening participation that are kind of cross-cutting across the engineering and NSF directorates. I've seen in some other funding agencies different mechanisms by which funders are now expecting institutions to compete. So like DOE having a major focus on the Justice 40 initiative and expecting significant environmental justice work with any new research that they're going to lead. And NIH moving the needle on saying we want to see existing partnerships with HBCUs and HSIs that you can leverage. I've seen some NSF grants where there's opportunities for that they say 20% of the budget has to go to community partners. Where do you see NSF trends moving in terms of expectations of universities when it comes to broadening access and equity? I'm curious because we want to be able to position ourselves competitively as an institution to be ready to respond to those calls and be able to position our institution for success. And so if you could speak to anything where you see directions in NSF moving that way, I'd be very interested.
So as an investigator, I didn't tend to read executive orders and the Chips and Science Act, which is 1,000 pages. But now I would. Okay. So they are directing us where we have to spend our money. This is where you want to be there. So you're going to be optimally aligned. And it's not that hard to do that. For years, I've been in institutions where can we have more hires so that we can hire more women or other underrepresented groups? No, it actually should be part of your hiring practice. It should be part of what you do. So I think that some of these expectations of where funding agencies are asking campuses to go are where we should be going. Now, the we now is not as a federal person, but as an academic member, just like you. We have, as a federal agency, the opportunity to persuade. We have the opportunity to convene people who don't normally sit at the table, industry partners who don't usually talk to each other at the same table. That's exciting. But we also have an opportunity when we ask you to include considerations for you to be part of moving the needle. So, yeah.
Maybe we'll take one last question. Gabby, did you have a question?
Thank you. It was a fantastic talk, just getting the outline of that. I wanted to flip the question around to actually go back to what you were talking about. and like what we can do to help NSF to actually report, the outcomes. And I got really inspired about what you were saying, that you are inviting some of these centers to really identify how to measure society impact. So I wanted to hear your thoughts a little bit more on that and how that can trickle down as a single PI in terms of how we report outcomes, so that you can then, I guess, direct back to the Senate that this would be something to fund more in the future. So like the successful outcomes of what you've been funding.
I think that the opportunity for reporting outcomes comes even on your own lab webpage. So how many times have I seen a lab webpage with this paper was published? And a link to the paper. But what does it mean to society? So are you only speaking to your colleagues or to potential postdocs or graduate students who you want to join your labs? Think about the opportunity to speak about your impact of that paper and how it is going to have, either in the near term or the far term, make a change that affects the rest of the population beyond your narrow group of colleagues, right? That is something that starts with you. To think about how you talk about your work in the classroom, to think about then communicating with your program directors and officers at NIH, NSF, or wherever your funding is from, about what's happening. I used to wonder if people read my annual report when I would write it. To anybody else wonder that? Sometimes I would put really provocative statements in my annual report, because some of my work in my early, when I started doing head injury in children, it was with infants and child abuse. I mean, I could put really provocative statements in, and I didn't hear anything. I am so impressed that at NSF, we really read them and reach out. But it also takes you, well, that's once a year. Please reach out to us, because we really do amplify those messages of societal impact. I think we all actually own talking about what we are doing, even before it gets to a final paper. I think we need to do a better job. I'm trying, I want you to try, to talk about why you love doing the research that you do. Not just about what it's going to do someday, but how the day-to-day. I have an experiment, I'll tell you, so Monday, okay? I had an experiment on Monday, didn't get the outcome we thought. Now I'm really not sure about this application for sport. And I thought it wouldn't matter, and it mattered tremendously. And lives were at stake, so, and animals. So I need to talk about what I'm learning day to day, week by week, and how exciting it is, and how impactful it will be in the future, but what I'm doing right now. Because during our pandemic, when the news kept changing, we were washing our hands, scrubbing our surfaces, cleaning our bananas, and now, plexiglass things, and then we're starting to wear masks. And the general public were confused. Were we wrong? Did we not know how we? So the whole idea that we learn as we go as scientists and engineers, and these are not failures, these are learning experiences, is a message that I think we need to do a better job of getting that out. We will inspire people at all ages to pursue a career like ours, where we're asking the questions about how the world works. How can we make it work better? In my case, how does the body work? How can we make it understand it in health and disease and intervene earlier, a successful outcome? So impact, I think, begins at the individual level, and surely at the agency level like this, I tell those stories that are also about the day-to-day too. So I'd love to hear those stories. Reach out to your program director if you have NSF funding, or to me directly if you're not sure who to communicate to, because those stories, every once in a while we go, I have this at Georgia Tech as a chair. Let's go around the table. All the chairs get to talk about something that's happening in their department or their school. And I do that at the director level. Yeah. Give me your stories. I want to tell your stories.
Susan. Oh, we did. Okay.
Okay, they would like to know, will NSF really change the expectations for institutional matching funds for MRI grants going forward, and beginning when?
Well, the answer is it's in the act. It was passed. So we have to do that. And the real concern is how much money will be allocated to that. So are we going to fund fewer of them because each award has to be larger now because there's no matching funds. And so that's very much, we don't even have an appropriation. We have an authorization to do that. It'll be hard for us to know the when is 23. That's what I really think it'll be 23. Don't quote me on that because it's not out, but that's my guess.
Susan, thank you for
Thank you.
informing us, inspiring us. I can't imagine how different your life is going from a department chair to now head of the engineering directorate, but thank you so much for spending time with us today and your fantastic talk.
Thank you.